And we're back with another Birds of a Feather episode with Aimee Bird with a Y, Michael Bird with an I, discussing, what do we discuss, Aimee? What would you say the things that we discuss?
That's a good question. Maybe what's in the news a lot of the time in the church, the world church?
Yeah, exactly. I suppose with a specific focus on kind of gender, church, culture, theology.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a big thing. So yeah, maybe that's our place.
Yeah.
But the first thing I've got to ask is to determine where you are on the evangelical elite spectrum. So, Aimee, if faced with a choice between shopping for groceries at Whole Foods, where you can buy broccoli for about $26 a kilo because it's organic, and it only lasts about a day and a half before it spoils, doing that or eating at Cracker Barrel, where would you prefer to go?
Yeah, I hate these questions because neither of those are my jam. But I'm clearly not an elite. But I don't like Cracker Barrel. So I think I would choose a grocery store.
You'd probably choose the grocery store. Well, that is just so elitist. And I am, for one, frankly, not surprised. Yeah, I've been to a Cracker Barrel once, and I just don't like the idea of eating food with farm equipment dangling above my head.
I don't mind that. I don't mind the scenery, the atmosphere. It's just, I don't know. My kids love it.
Really? Well, my thing is, I like Applebee's and Chili's, and I mean, people look at me like, like, what's wrong with you? But it's like, it's cool. It's fairly inexpensive. I've had good service. You get like my wife loves a really nice thin steak with some avocado and nice French fries and endless refills on drinks, which we don't get in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah. So you order a soda, you pay for each soda. This has ended very badly for when Americans get the bill when they realize they drank like $30 worth of soda. It can end.
That's hilarious.
Except when you're the waiter trying to explain that we don't do things like in America. Yeah, but that's another story.
That's so funny. There's little differences.
They are little differences. Or like me finding out what a speakeasy is.
We were talking about that before we hit record.
Yeah, I thought that was a type of like an app. Like, just get me on go off Twitter and Instagram and go onto Speakeasy, and we'll get you that way.
We were sharing like if God really gave us what we want instead of what's good for us.
Yeah,
what we would have.
Aimee wanted a bourbon speakeasy. I wanted world peace,
which goes not what you said.
Oh, it was something like that, or maybe there would be no need for orphanages or something like that. I'm pretty sure I said something like that. But anyway, get into our main jam, Aimee. You've had some big events going on in your life. You've decided to leave with your husband. You've decided to leave the OPC, the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. You wrote a very lengthy, very, I think, passionate, moving, a very, very sort of open blog post on this on your webpage. Could you just summarize briefly what's been going on in that space and maybe tell people what you said in the blog post?
Yeah, so it's been a 2-year process, really. There's a group of church officers in my denomination who don't like my writing and, in fact, think it's dangerous. And so they had, there was this group on Facebook that was full of church officers from, different NAPARC denominations. But it was kind of led by some OPC guys, and they're very patriarchal. And they've been harassing. They've been calling ahead of my speaking engagements. They have very reviling language on there, and they plot to do things. And, I've been documenting it. After a while, once I found out to the level of what it is, I sought help, and I had a lot of receipts. There was a whole website that was designed by someone who kind of exposed all these threads, and they're not just against me, they're against other women. They're some racist comments in there, very misogynistic comments in there, a whole bunch of stuff.
They're not slamming Beth Moore, are they?
I'm sure they were at one point. I mean, I'm sure they had fun with the go home thing and all of that. So I can't even remember who all, so many, but I was kind of their focus. And they thought I was dangerous. So it became, something I had to live with on a regular basis that is, really upsetting, because these are people with like authority in the denomination. These are the people who are supposed to, care about my soul and care about me as a person and show love, and critique is one thing, but this was definitely something very different. So in trying to confront it, and I also had one of my elders was in that group that I found out. So that was devastating. That was devastating because it was kind of an exploitation of my trust and a deep violation of it. They were friends of ours too. So it was just terrible. So going through that process in my local church, trying to confront it, and the rest of my elders did end up supporting me and trying to, but having to deal with it on a presbytery level, all the way to the General Assembly, which is like the biggest Presbyterian annual meeting. Yeah. I tried to follow the process, and I learned a whole lot about the process itself. And of course, no process is perfect, right? But I found out what it really costs the victims, to come forward and to try to do this formally, how things get parsed from, the big picture and the context of, which was really spiritual abuse. They get parsed into these little charges that, there were sermons preached about the perfect hatred of God against feminism, which there were articles written about how I'm the queen and general of the army of feminists, and, a lot of name calling. But it just the whole case got reduced to me and Rachel Miller, another author that they went after, being called raging wolves. Like that was the only thing, the only charge that stuck through the whole process. And even then, during that trial,
I would have called you the Ulysses S. Grant to the eternal functional subordination, or more like a General Sherman, because after you came through, there was nothing but fire and ash.
That would have been, a much more honorable name.
I'd ride that one. I'd ride that title.
I'm just so tired of talking about these guys, but the whole process was just so painful. And what I found, like I'm sitting in a presbytery meeting at my own presbytery, for some of the local part of it that's going on, which also got turned inside out and upside down. And the guy who is up front talking, the head of the committee, because everything's about committees, was talking about their recommendation, and he talks about this book, Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, and makes a comment like, who needs to recover from the Bible. And so here's this commentary being made, misrepresenting my work at a presbytery meeting that I'm sitting in, but I'm not allowed to speak and defend myself. And then a couple times he referred to me as that lady, and with snide remarks. And I'm just supposed to sit there and be quiet while no one else objects. No one says out of order. None of the presbyters, none of those pastors or elders confronted this man.
Yeah.
While I sat there. So, there are about 4 different presbyteries where I know that I wasn't talked about very well. And, it's, pretty disturbing, but I followed through the process. I loved my local church, the people in it. I very much liked being a part of a denomination with historical confessions, and I like the liturgy. But once it all followed through to GA, just the physiological effects of going through all of that it was just too much. I started having like neurological effects, like brain fog kind of things. Like went on vacation and forgot my whole wallet and purse for the entire vacation. Left our gas grill on all night long. Left my keys running in the car for 4 hours while I was hiking. Like just, yeah, scary stuff. To where we were like, after GA and the ruling kind of went well, and at the same time clobbers you with its language, which I have all that documented on my blog. But just, we knew we had to step back at that point. We shouldn't have to pay like this just to be disciples in the church, because that's all my writing is about, is discipleship. So it's pretty dangerous though.
So you haven't then, so you've left your OPC congregation, which, I guess is, kind of a healthy thing to do, although obviously, you've got friends and people there that you kind of step away from to a certain degree. I'm assuming you have not, therefore, as many people might have anticipated, joined the First Church of Satan.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are at a church right now. It's interesting because I'm in a position where, well, first of all, I want to spend some time just thinking about church government and, where we want to be members of, what kind of government do we want to be in. They're all, of course, are flawed in different ways, but I'm not feeling very safe in the Reformed churches in our town. So, and I kind of put in my article, like, that's just not a question I should have to be asking when I'm going to worship, is if I'm safe or not. Like, I want my family to be able to flourish and contribute and grow, not worry about those kind of things. So, right now we're worshiping at a church, which I'm not really sharing where, because I don't want this poor little church to be under the harassment that they will be if I share. So we're worshiping in a small church right now that we feel like we can heal, and while we take things slow and think about all that.
That sounds fine, perfectly understandable. So, well, I hope it's a safe place and an encouraging place where you feel like you belong and you're able to participate in the worship and the ministries of the church and be ministered to and being supported.
Thanks. That's another hard part about going through. And I've heard, in documenting through all this, I've just made so many friendships, and a lot of people have reached out who've gone through spiritual abuse and who are still, very much in stages of healing. Some aren't even in the church. Some can't even go to church. But it is interesting, you think, oh, okay, now I'll just move on. But there's just so much healing that needs to happen. Like, there's a part of me that just wants to be completely invisible, which is really sad, and definitely I monitor everything I participate in, or, if I'm in a small group or something, like, am I talking too much? Do they think my voice is a threat? All those questions where I might not necessarily be with people who are like that, but that's just now what goes through my head when I'm just trying to be a normal person in church.
Yeah. Yep. I can imagine.
Yeah.
I think many people can relate to that. Many people feel for you. I think many people also feel, I think, very upset that it's come to that for any person, would be in that situation where they have to feel invisible, or they, where you've got to leave your own denomination because there's a kind of Praetorian guard of patriarchy that's kind of, got it out for you. And
and I didn't tell you that. So this church is having started this little kind of discipleship group for people who want to grow in their theology, and they're going through your evangelical theology book.
Awesome.
I know. So I decided, well, I should go to that, and so I went to it, and the elders are in that group too. And on Sunday, one of the elders made it a point to come to me and just tell me, Aimee, like, a comment that you made, and he shared with me in more detail, like, how a comment I made impacted him deeply. and the way he reads scripture. And my husband and I looked at each other like, because, he was fixing a car that night. I come home and I'm like, I don't know, I probably talk too much, or who knows what, I just never know what people think about me, and so we looked at each other like, oh, it's just so, it felt, I can't even explain. Like I haven't had that kind of interaction.
It's called
with leadership,
it's called gratitude and encouragement.
Yeah, it felt really good.
It should be rare. It shouldn't be rare.
Right.
Okay. Yes, we all need. Sometimes we need some people. I don't know. You watch. There's an American TV show. You may have heard of it, called Parks and Rec.
Yes.
Sometimes we need a Chris Traeger in our life who has that sort of insane optimism, who can say, Amy, that is literally the wisest thing I've ever heard someone say in the history of humanity, and you are literally the best person I have ever known.
I don't know if I need to hear that, but
yeah, well, I mean,
it was very encouraging.
Okay, that's good. We need, I guess, I tell my students, encouragement is steroids for people who are struggling. And if it's and I think of some of the people who have helped me in my life, and it's often those words of encouragement that have really shaped my memory of them. And that's what this is actually interesting. I tell my students, no one is going to remember your sermons. I hate to tell you this, but within about 10 or 15 minutes after your sermon, people aren't going to remember much of it, but they will always remember the impressions of how you made them feel. And and that's why it's not just the content. It is how it's how you treat people. And I mean, and this can also have a negative thing. Like if you treat people badly, it will go like that. There's an old Afghanistan proverb. Okay, the axe never remembers the tree, but the tree always remembers the axe. So it swings both ways. If you've offended someone or hurt someone, you may not even know. You may not even remember, but they will remember. But it also goes the other way with encouragement. You may have said something, someone like, good for you on doing that. Maybe it's like a 16-year-old who's just led their first Bible study forever. And, maybe it was mediocre. But you say, good for you putting an effort in, you've done something. And they go on to do it. And, in my case, I had people encouraging me, saying, things, maybe Michael, you could do some stuff in biblical studies one day. And I said, it's not like I'm going to be like Don Carson or anything, it's kind of like, I'm just a little redhead guy in Australia. So who's ever going to care what I think? Who's going to care what I think? And then 20 years later, I get to tell people, now. It's like, well, I can't do that because I'll be on my book tour in America with N.T. Wright. Did I mention my book tour? Because I'm on a book tour now. I probably need a little bit more.
That's such a good point, though, because, coming out of the OPC, some of the things that I really value confessionally, about the denomination, I experienced that other side of this overemphasis on gatekeeping, and you can have all these gifts, and if you're lacking like love, you miss Christ. Like you can have all the words and still miss Christ. And so it is interesting, just talking about something like encouragement is, such a huge, important part of the Christian life and leadership. Exactly.
And I would say a lot of leadership is simply, leadership's got various sides to it, but encouraging the people around you, trying to make your goals their goals is one part of leadership. But I really think encouragement, and to put another way, I've spent time in the military, but what really determines a unit's fighting ability, it doesn't matter if they've got the best weapons or the best trainings. If their morale is low, then they can be defeated by, a bunch of people with sticks and arrows who are motivated with high morale. Morale really is a force multiplier. And if you put that into more a Christian or church context. You know,
Yeah.
people who are confident that the leadership knows who they are, values their contribution, understands the struggles and their journey, knows the good, the bad, and the ugly about them, but loves them anyway. I think that has a huge impact on the spiritual temperament of the church.
Hmm.
I mean, you can understand, look, there is a certain, you know, shepherds do want to keep the wolves away from the flock.
Right.
But, you know, but if that's your kind of like fixation, and you end up saying, gosh, that rabbit looks a little bit like a fox, better get rid of the rabbit as well,
Well, yeah, and
rabbit
just
today, wolf tomorrow.
having secondary issues become, issues of calling out somebody as a wolf.
Yeah. And saying things like, maybe we need to do better with, like, sexual abuse in the church. And maybe things like a lot of the things that we say are biblical are not really biblical. They're more like aspects of our culture that we've given a very vague biblical gloss.
Right.
But I guess people get invested in their own gatekeepingness and their own abilities. And, in order to be the champion, you've got to have an enemy to find. You've got to have someone you're against, and having someone you can other, and that's the one you got to watch out for. It's a great way to keep up a little bit of fear, so your little tribe will keep you at the forefront of attention, because you could say, I'm the one holding the barbarians at the gate, that type of a thing. Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of wasted energy, that's for sure. And then now, like, another challenge is, I mean, Matt and I have never not been a member of a church before. And so if we've moved or something like that, you transfer your membership, right? And we've transferred our membership, from a different denomination even. But now, we need to take it slow. I don't really know where God is leading us. Neither does he. And we know the importance of, being in a church and being a part of the church, and we want that. And so it's hard to put yourself out there vulnerably again, but also, we want to be wise and not rush into something. And there's just so many problems in all the major denominations right now with abuse in the church and how it's being handled. Abuse is going to be everywhere, but what do you do with it? How do you handle it? And how do you care for the vulnerable? These are big questions, that a lot of people are struggling with.
Yeah.
So I don't know, how do you don't want to move from one denomination that's got major issues with that to another one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like jumping from one shipwreck to one beset by pirates or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a lot to think about, and just trust God through.
Now, I know there's one question that a lot of people are wondering about, Aimee, and that's like, okay, you've seen the worst of sort of biblical complementarianism, or so-called biblical complementarianism. You've seen how the patriarchy works out, even the process of making a complaint, how the process becomes the punishment itself for the victims. And even when you get a type of vindication, it feels like a very hollow, almost like a Pyrrhic victory. It's like, oh my gosh,
still reductive.
Yeah, it's still. Why don't you say, look, I've looked patriarchal Christianity in the face, been there, done that, bought the T-shirt, I'm done. Let's go full Monty egalitarianism. Let's find a place and a space where women are not just marginal, women are equal but separate, women are equal in being but subordinated in role. Let's find a place where women are equal at all levels of leadership, church governance, fully integrated. Women preach, not a deal. And we don't just have male preachers and women sharing. We actually have women preachers. No kind of funny games of language. Why not just go the full Monty and find an orthodox evangelical, in the best sense, church now? An orthodox, I should say orthodox evangelical. I feel like evangelical now needs its own adjective. Find an orthodox evangelical, or religiously evangelical rather than politically evangelical church that's egalitarian, You know, there's several, I think, denominations. I think what they're like EPC, is that one? Is that a thing?
Yeah, EPC does ordain women.
And also, I think ACNA, although I mean Anglican Communion North
It
America.
depends on where you are. The ACNA.
Yeah. So they've got different dioceses will have different views on that. But you know, that's one area you can sort of go to. So why not just bite the egalitarian bullet and be that way? Is there anything that stops you, or are you still kind of in flux on a journey figuring?
I've got multiple answers to that. You know, starting with I'm not quite all the way egalitarian either, and I'm still learning. You know, I'm trying to talk with humility about these things, but where I am isn't so much the biblicist arguments. You know, like 2 Timothy or 1 Timothy 2. Where I am is more of a typico-symbolical thing. You know, it's what we represent as man and woman in our typology of Christ's spousal love for his bride. And I do think there's something there. And I think Pope John Paul II has some good teaching on that too, where he talks about how the bridegroom is masculine, and that what that signifies in his masculinity, you know, Jesus' masculinity, is an order of love. He's the first to love. And I add to that, he's the first to give, and he's the first to sacrifice. And I think there's something to that. And even like kind of associated with that language, Gregory the Great talked about pastor being kind of the best man to the bridegroom, there to give the gifts to the bride in his absence. I think there's something to that. I don't think that it looks like what complementarian churches want it to look like at all, because I think it looks a lot more like the Song of Songs, where you have, you know, the woman's voice bookends the song. It's the dominant voice in there. It's very evangelical. So I do think that in being the first to love and the first to give and the first to sacrifice, that women, you know, would be very much receiving that. It's reciprocal, giving it back. And also, you know, she would be fructified through that and wearing that. And there would be this dynamism there that we don't see in complementarian churches. And I you know, even as I look at scripture and you see where in 1 Corinthians, where we have the most written instruction wise about corporate worship, you've got women prophesying and you've got women praying. That isn't happening in a lot of complementarian churches. So, you know, I wonder, how does that transfer then? A woman prophesying, you know, now, like if you're in a cessationist church, let's say, well, at least reading scripture. But I don't know. I'm trying to learn more in those areas of what that looks like, because, you know, you do see in scripture more women named as church planners, you know, of the houses that they're meeting in than men. And when they're couples, you know, often the woman's name is before the man's name. And you get the snapshot in Romans 16 and you see shoulder to shoulder ministry between men and women. So I do think that there's a lot more than complementarianism. And at this point, I probably feel much safer in an egalitarian church. But I don't know that I'm quite there with just the way that they just make it all, you know, every way of service. I don't know if equal is the right word. I don't know, because I mean, rights are important, and we, you know, that's kind of the language of rights, you know, and equality. But I'm just wondering about the meaningfulness behind the stories that our bodies tell as men and women in the church too.
Yeah, I would say, I'm just trying to think with you here. I would say a real biblical egalitarianism isn't interested in equality as a type of political ideal that is then mapped into Christianity, but it tries to recognize the genuine complementarity between men and women, that there are, I believe there are two biological.
Yeah, egalitarians use that word first. It was hijacked.
Yeah. So I think I mean, others have said that complementarity is a good term, because I think there are some differences between men and women. Of course, you've got the generalities, and then you've got the specificities of each individual, of course. But we are male and female in the image of God, and I don't think equality requires flattening out both the general distinctives and the specific distinctives that you get between people. So I would say you could still maintain a fair bit of that, even with an egalitarian view. I guess the thing is are the differences a matter of hierarchy? And that's what I think is the egalitarian aspect in its reading of Scripture, that, people, when you become a Christian, you don't cease to be Greek or Jewish or slave or male or female. You don't cease to be those things, but those things are no longer a means of privilege and hierarchy within the church. And I think that's the egalitarian insight, which is why you can have men or women praying and prophesying in church. Now, there's a whole bunch. I mean, this is obviously something we can't do in a few sound bites, because you've got to look at things like the household codes of the New Testament.
Right.
And there is a prohibition made in 1 Timothy 2 about something, and it does pertain to women. So there's some dense exegesis you've got to do. But I would say the general biblical ambience of the New Testament is one where the hierarchies, where the differences are there, they're not denied. So, but they're just not a form of hierarchy. I think that's the key thing I would take away.
Well, and it's like the whole way power is used is different. It's not to kind of rule over as much as it is to empower those in the church. Now, there are times where you need that governmental order when sin enters the picture, but the obsession with authority and the nature of what authority is in a lot of complementarian churches, and that's the kicker, because Mike, the whole reason why I wrote a book to begin with, my first book, was out of loneliness of a woman in the church with a mind, who wanted to be invested in theologically, who wanted to contribute theologically, who wanted to be in those conversations, because that's where I lit up, and as I got married right out of college. I wanted to learn more about my faith, and I wanted to learn, like, why is it so important? How does it enter into my everyday living? Like all these questions coming at me with little kids, like, should I put them in upward sports because we're Christians, or, like all these different things. Theology speaks to all of that, So I write this book, and as with each book I've written, it's always been with the focus of discipleship. And what is a disciple? What can a disciple do? How do we grow? How do we relate? And that's the crazy part, is that as I started, as I was given more platform, as I was given more places to speak and seeing, there's so many women with these same struggles as me, and seeing that they just want to be invested in as disciples, and contribute as disciples, not be put off into this side wing of the church labeled women's ministries and not even be given much training for it. That's, the anger really started coming when I was addressing, women as disciples in the church with their brothers, not just off to the side on our own. So it's interesting because, so many of these complementarian churches functionally make women ministers to other women, by putting, all of their teaching gifts on the side. And they're kind of having pastoral roles that are just they're not ordained, But to really talk about what our privilege and responsibility is covenantally as brothers and sisters in the household of God, that's where all of the anger is coming from. I haven't said anything about ordination. I haven't, that isn't the focus of my writing. It's always been about discipleship. So, just this question of the agency of the female disciple.
Yeah.
Is a huge one.
Yeah, and you could make the point that if you segregate the women's ministry and discipleship, then by necessity they're going to have to develop their own ministers. Leaders have to
Yeah.
arise, and then it's like they get punished for doing that. And it's
Right.
sort of it's a really weird cycle. We want to compartmentalize it, but we don't want it to. We want it to maintain a shallow. We don't want leaders to arise out of it because they may because suddenly what happens if you've got like a women's, and I think this is what happened to Bed Moore, you started doing like women's Bible studies, but then the men said they get more out of attending the Beth Moore than they did with their own teaching pastor. It's like, she's much better than you. And there's no two ways, and there's nothing you can do about that. And other than tell her to shut up, go home and make me some flapjacks or, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, women are flocking to the parachurch stuff because, that's where they can do things. But even there, the resources and what they're able to do in those spaces is still the same stuff. And then it's just really ironic that after all of this, here I am just writing about discipleship. And then, the other ironic part about it too, and I think this is a real challenge in the church, is that I think where my voice fits in well is as a layperson, an informed layperson, and as a woman. And I think that's why our podcast at MOS was, doing well when it was. It's because you've got this pastor, academic, and laywoman. And I think that's what we need in a lot of ways. Like, the academics don't exist to talk to each other, That's not how it's supposed to work. I mean, yeah, you're supposed to talk to each other, but the benefits are supposed to come down to the church. And same with pastors. The benefits are supposed to trickle down, and we are supposed to be then lifted up by that and able to use our gifts and be gifts to one another. And so I think often the lay people are like left out of the conversation. And a lot of times they just exist on social media or in parachurch stuff, and it's kind of sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds exactly.
It's like,
right.
Oh well, so if you're a thinking person in the church and you want to learn more theology, does that mean that you need to go to seminary? If you don't feel called to the ministry, I don't know. It just seems like where's the actual investing in discipling in the church? Because what a blessing that would be to the church.
Exactly. Well, Aimee, I know many people will be very keen to know what happens in the rest of your journey with you and with your husband and the family, to see where you end up. I guess both church-wise, theologically, but if you ever end up as a bishop in the Anglican Church of North America, I just want to say I'm the first one who called it. The very Reverend Saint Aimee. So. of Maryland. So yeah. I don't know whether you could do Anglo-Catholic. That might be a little bit weird. I mean, I find it a little bit weird. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens one day. One day. I don't know, maybe moderator of the Southern Baptist Convention. I don't know. The possibilities are endless. We'll have to see what happens. But as always, Aimee, a pleasure talking to you, and bringing more interactions between Australia and America, bridging these linguistic and cultural divides.
That's right.
So that's good. So yeah,
good talking to you, Mike.
We'll have to you and Matt will have to come out to Australia one day, and we can show you.
I would love that. What
Christianity looks in a different world. Well, save up your frequent flyer points, and
and I have to save up money in case I want more than one soda.
Yes.
There's no free refills.
There's no free refills. So just get the one soda, but drink it slowly.
Gotcha.
That's my advice. And the other thing you need to know, there's no Cracker Barrel out here. We have no Cracker Barrel.
Well, I can live. I'll be good.
But
we'll just make some avocado toast.
Yes, with Vegemite on toast with avocado on top. Yes, it is good. You've got to trust me. Okay.
Put a fried egg on there.
Yeah, well, you can do toast avocado on a fried egg, but seriously, Aimee, toast, Vegemite, and avocado. It works on so many levels.
I don't know.
It's just right. We'll give it a try. I promise. It works. It works. Okay.
I don't see how you don't like gin, but you like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't like grits either. I mean, so I've got some peculiar.
Yeah. Okay.
But there we go. We'll get you and the family into some Australian culinary delights. We'll get you into Tim Tams at least. Tim Tams and coffee, that could work.
Okay.
Well, till next time, Aimee, all the best.
Thank you.